All right. Welcome to Real Estate Hustlers Podcast. I'm your host, Josh Appleman, founder and CEO of Appleman Capital. Today we're joined with Scott Morse, starting at age 20 as a sales agent, now leads 200 plus employees in a real estate call center. He has a wholesale business and an operator and investor in self-storage, Padsplit, and AirBnBs, and is located in Seattle. Scott, we appreciate you coming on the show today. If you could let the listeners know a little bit more about yourself.
Sure, Josh. Thanks for the invite. And I'll start off only on one little correction there. I'm actually not in Seattle. I'm in Colombia, South America. So I'm on a completely separate continent. So I'm running our wholesale operation, which I keep my closers in Orlando, but I'm running this big infrastructure you see behind me from Latin America. And that's how I'm driving so much lead traffic throughout the industry, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, I'm in a completely different country.
Very cool. Well, let's get into it. Tell us about how you first got into real estate, and then how that transpired to where you're at currently.
Yeah, so I've only been in the REI space for like the past 4 years, Josh, and so I made all my money in another lead generation vertical. But I had a buddy of mine who was constantly being like, "Hey, man, you want a loan on this? Hey, do you want to be a capital partner on this?" And so he was somebody that I trusted. I didn't even really care what the returns were as long as they were positive. But he slowly introduced me to that over like 4 or 5 years. And then finally, when that industry where I made all that money and kind of shut down or some regulatory changes happened, he was like, "Dude, why don't you just do what you were doing over in that space in this space?" And he broke down like how the wholesaling works and how direct the seller works. And I was like, man, I can just take everything I've learned in the past like 12 years in this vertical and easily create it in this vertical. And that's how I started this machine you see behind me.
Got it. Interesting. Very cool. So you've been doing real estate for 4 years.
Yep.
So how many properties do you now own?
So on the commercial side, I'm a partial owner. Only one of them 100% out, but on 7 properties. On the single family side, we have about 40 some doors. And then we have, that we are keeping and holding for buy and holds. And then we have a number of pad splits and Airbnbs that are in a separate category. Smaller number.
Got it. What is a pad split? I have not heard of that one before.
So I think pad split, honestly, it's a reflection of the economy. It's what I think is going to become more and more prevalent since the hedge funds have just gobbled up so much stuff. But particularly in the Sunbelt states and in Florida, pad split is a mechanism in which you can take your property, let's say it's a 4-bedroom property, and people can go in there and rent it out by the rooms for long-term or month-to-month leases. So it's really allowed us to take Airbnbs that may not be performing as well and then kind of redesign the kitchen a little bit, kind of make sure there's easily accessible to the washer and dryer, but where you're charging a per the bedroom rent fee.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense. That's what that gets it. So let's it's interesting. So you grew a 200 plus person call center. Tell us about the milestones to get to 200 people, because that's a lot of personalities to manage. Been there myself.
Yeah, I think that like all great businesses, they kind of start out to solve a great problem. And so I didn't originally set out to have 200 plus employees. I just wanted to get like higher quality leads for my own closers. And I tried like the Philippines, and it was okay-ish, but like I would listen to a call and I could never listen to a whole call. It would be like, this is so disgusting. I can't believe this is the first representation of my company. And then I tried a team in Egypt, and I tried all over the world. Finally, I found a guy in Latin America in a place called Cali, Colombia. And I was like, oh, these guys understand American sarcasm, which is like 30% of being on the phones as a quote unquote VA. And so I just moved down here to start my own little venture. And I started out with 6 cubicles just for my own closers. And I was going to go back to Orlando. Let me just get set up. But I fell in love with it down here. I brought my 2 daughters down here. I have a 7-year-old and 5-year-old daughter. And so over time, I've just been able, because I'm the highest paying English speaking job in the entire state, and I have an awesome office environment, I've attracted really amazing, talented adults into our infrastructure here. And so like I have a really, I think, like class A office space team that's allowed me to scale something pretty unique for the REI world.
Got it. So you all are taking inbound leads and then converting those over to investors?
Yeah, for the most part. So like this kind of ages me a little bit, but there used to be something called the Hair Club for Men. And the guy on the commercial he'd say something like, not only am I a client, but I'm the biggest customer or whatever, right? Or I'm the CEO. So same thing with me. I'm my own biggest client, and I don't allow any affiliates in my market. But essentially, like guys in the mastermind was like, dude, how are you guys doing so much so fast? And I was like, oh, because I built out a team. And then somebody else was like, hey, can I get leads? And then somebody else. But we're purely outbound. We did 59 million outbound dials out of here last year, Josh. So this is pure outbound phone savages, nothing inbound. PPC is another channel. Inbound mail is another channel. These are just outbound, like hooligans, phone hooligans.
Okay. All right. So for the beginning real estate investor who's looking to explore different verticals, you've got your wholesalers who are out there actively looking, buying leads and buying lists or driving for dollars.
Yep.
I guess what would be some good nuggets for you to give to them if they're tuning in of how to find their first house deal or find their first deal period, commercial or residential?
Yeah, I think that it's all budget reflective, so if you have no budget, one of the things that I watched my business partner in Orlando start out with before I ever got involved with them literally was just yard signs and yard signs. I'm talking about a year and a half of yard signs. And now, and this guy's name's Alex Kazade. He's my business partner in Orlando. He's got $50 million real estate portfolio that he's amassed in his 8-9 years doing this. But I remember every Friday and Saturday, he would go out there and just plant those signs and plant those signs and plant those signs. And so I really love that. Obviously, I have an extreme affinity for cold calling, Josh. I think that cold calling is a low barrier to entry, high education channel where if you can master cold calling on your own, you don't hire a big behemoth like me until you got an established sales team. But that education cycle and that pain that you have to go through to be successful, if you can be successful in outbound cold calling, which I can give you all the tips and strategies we can go over, but that right there ensures it's guaranteed that you will be successful in all the other channels once you have the capital to buy those more expensive leads.
Tell us some tips and strategies. Cold calling. I mean, that's like you said, low barrier to entry. Anyone can do it. How would you get started?
Yeah. So I think the first thing is how big should my universe of trying be? And the true answer is you're just going to try until you get it right. Okay. So cool. So we've established that. But a 10,000 record data set with a skip trace data, right? So it's in the real estate world, you can buy an address and you get skip trace, which is typically 3 numbers. You're really saying, hey, if I buy 10,000 addresses, I have 30,000 phone numbers because each address typically has 3 phone numbers. And I would encourage anybody out there that if you will take the time necessary to beat up a 10,000 address list or 30,000 phone numbers, which will probably take you a month and a half or 2, I am confident that if you don't quit and you treat it, that you will get your first deal out of that 10,000 records. I think that's a fair benchmark. And if for whatever reason you don't, you've made progress. That next 10,000, you're going to get it. And so I would just say is hey, listen, be prepared for pain. You'll get significantly more no's than you ever get a yes. And if you get, if you can get comfortable with that, even my top guys, they probably go through 150 to 180 no's before they get the first person to say, yes, I'm interested in that all cash offer.
Got it. It's casting a wide net out there and then just reeling in and seeing who's interested and then ultimately helping someone out.
Yeah, it is. And to be prepared to have real conversations. It's so much easier than what people perceive it to be. I promise you, I've seen and taken so many people that are just hey, I want to do it. These kids, with all due respect to all my wonderful, talented, amazing kids, they know nothing about the real estate market in the United States. We put them through our education, our internal course. We have a whole classroom over there, 30. But you can do it. And I think for me, having sales skills and entering into the real estate space helps significantly because if you're a good salesperson, it's insert product here. And I see the REI space merely as just another product to sell.
Tell us about the org structure. So 200 people, what does that look like as it tiers up to the top?
Yeah, so I'll talk really from the top down, just focused on the sales side, which I think because I have accounting, I have a data department and marketing team. But below myself is a director of sales. And so that's the main tip of the spear there. It's a person who's probably the most in tune with everybody else. And then every one of these kind of bullpens, it's about 10 to 12 cubicles per bullpen. That's a team. And every 10 to 12 agents has a team lead. So it goes CEO, director of sales, team leads, and then agents. Also, we have our quality assurance. We have floor support. And that really, and then we have a platform manager and dialers and all the other stuff. But from a sales thing, it's like, hey, listen, do we have sales trainers? Check. Do we have sales trainer director? Check. Do we have every agent responsible for one person? That's their team lead. Do those team leads then report to the director of sales? Yes. And then I can have a linear conversation with the DOS, and we can really isolate exactly what's happening in any given market, et cetera.
Got it. So how do you all help real estate investors?
So our avatar is probably pretty high. So I get to see a lot of what the most successful guys in the nation are doing, Josh, particularly on the direct-to-seller vehicle. But I think how we help people is just focus on closing. Like, that's really what these guys want to do. They want to have hyper-qualified leads that they can talk to, so they're not fishing. They're not out there, and they can literally just work on filleting the fish. Like, hey, I got a fish in the boat. Now it's time to cook up a meal. And so for us, my whole objective is less leads, longer conversations. I want people to talk to somebody who wants to talk to them. And so that's it. We just help connect these guys with motivated sellers instead of having to go out there and spend all day hoping to get a fish in the boat.
Got it. Okay, very good. So you're more than anything, you're lead generation for the real estate investor. Is that correct?
Yeah, 100%. Real estate investors and wholesalers, I'd say about our blend is about 50-50. Half of our clients are wholesalers. The other half are actual fix and flips or guys building their own portfolios who have an internal direct-to-seller sales team. They've already established their CRMs, their nurture cadences. They're already direct-to-seller in other channels. A lot of these guys are in TV, they're in PPC, but they're looking for a high-quality lead to come from an outbound channel.
Got it. Okay. What are give us some nuggets from guys that are getting to a certain level in their career. Give us some nuggets of what you've learned on your career path and some key takeaways.
Yeah, I'll keep it in line with the REI space. I can tell you some of these nuggets are what I see that people do wrong, and so I'll kind of hit you with some of that. In this place, I think a lot of times the investors, they kind of relinquish the sales a little too early, and they think that they can just outsource that. And so what ends up happening is you'll have a CEO who used to be direct to seller. He started to build his own portfolio. Now he's more managing properties. And then he just hires an outside sales guy. And then he hires an outside agency. And he's so far detached from the company that he's no longer listening to calls. He's no longer checking the follow-up cadences. And he's the absent CEO. Now, there's a time and place for that once you actually have, like you said, your org chart built out. But for the most part, I love it when the CEO genuinely knows his KPIs. He knows, hey, how many leads we got last week? How many offers did we make last week? How many deals did we put under contract? Who's my top closer? The last time they audited somebody's calls. And the difference between that active CEO and then the passive CEO is the difference between being a hobbyist and then building generational wealth. Because I have some monster affiliates, and the big dogs, they are so dialed in, they are so in tune or have the right infrastructure to have somebody in tune. It's a night and day difference, Josh, because I think too many people want to step away a little too soon from monitoring the sales process in the REI world.
Yeah, well, with any good business, you have to know your numbers. You have to know your cash in, cash out, and leads and lead generation top of your funnel. In my world, it's leases, making sure that our occupancy is above par. Any vacant unit is not producing cash flow. So when you're not producing cash flow, you never have a chance of getting that back every day it goes by. So knowing how many leads are coming in, how many leases were sent down, how many renewals, how long the unit's been vacant for, just on and on and on. But you've got to be able to know your numbers in order to better your business. Same with cash in, cash out. You've got to know your NOIs. You have to know the value of your estate on a big level. But you also have great people in place too to help manage the infrastructure that you put in.
Well, one other thing, Josh, I see from a lot of these guys is they're so used to buying off of MLS, and as the market shifted, and so like they've been making offers on MLS, right? Or they have a friendly broker that brings them deals. But when they want to go direct to seller, they actually have never had any true sales experience. And so I think people have to appreciate there's definitely a different level to it when you're going to go direct to seller to source your deals. You want to have somebody, even if you've made it as a successful entrepreneur, and you haven't really had any sales background, it's more than just beds, bath, and square footages. You're going to need to find out heartstrings. You're going to need to push hot buttons. You're going to need to create urgency. You're going to need to build value in exchange for equity. And a lot of these builders, if you will, have never had that pathway, so they don't have that experience, and they can fail with even the greatest of leads. So making sure you either have somebody who's studying sales, used to be a car sales guy, used to be even real estate, direct to with a broker, whatever it may be. You want to make sure that there's true sales experience in your organization if you're going to go direct to seller.
So a lot of noise in the background there.
They're celebrating because every time you'll hear that every few minutes or so, every time they send a lead where the seller wants under 70% of ARV, doesn't matter if it's 62%, Josh, or 38%. We just consider a qualified lead as anything under 70% of ARV. That's when you'll see them clapping.
Yeah, I'd say, well, depending on what market they're in, it's different times right now, but 70%. Of ARV, I mean, that could be, you could still be at a break even by the time you put your repairs in and your disposition cost, on and on and on.
Yeah, but
cool.
But real quick, that's the thing everybody's got to understand, is that's where the sales process starts. You get it at 70. It's your objective as the investor. It's your objective as the wholesaler. You got to build value, and you have to get it from 70 down to where you need to be, whether that be 52, 42, 68, it doesn't matter. But you can never accept a lead. Hey, they filled out a form on my website. They said they want to sell. No, now you got to exchange value for equity. And so this is what we try to do, is just get people started on second base, and then they go in for the close.
Yeah, for sure. Get in there, do your due diligence, and then make sure that's a balanced deal and it works out for seller and buyer, for sure.
That's right. Yep.
Very cool. If somebody wants to reach out to you, learn more about yourself, your company, how can they get a hold of you?
I think Instagram. And so for people that listen to this on the podcast, they might not know, but like, this is a real deal kind of like office. And so all I want is people just to come check us out on Instagram. It may or may not be a good fit in regards to our services, but you can find me on @Lamassu Leads, LAMASSU Leads. And what I want them to do is just see behind the scenes. I'm constantly sharing how we're scaling up other people's businesses, tips that I'm seeing people use, how people are now, really massaging novations into certain markets, what lists are performing the best, what call cadences are working, how to incorporate this with mail, et cetera, et cetera. So we have a wait list for our services. So at this stage, I'm just trying to bring attention to what we're doing, so that way more people are aware, like, hey man, something special is going on down there in Columbia with these guys.
Very cool, Scott. Definitely appreciate your time, and I look forward to following you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, brother. Have a good one.